So we're going to be talking about ORMs today. ORMs are object relational mappers. Pretty much what that means is that we know SQL now. We've worked with SQL for a couple of days. We're familiar with the concepts. But we need some way to actually use that inside of C#. Because remember, we're going to be creating our web servers inside of C#. So in our web servers talk to our database. Mm-hmm. So we need some way in C# in our backend language to actually query our database. So that's where ORMs come into play. Okay. ORMs make it so the idea, the blue sky vision of ORMs is that you never have to write a line of SQL in your whole life.
The link.
Yes, exactly.
I like that thought.
Yep. In practice and reality, that's never a thing. Like, you always got to know what SQL is. You're going to be writing SQL. You're going to know SQL. You're going to know what's going on. But we can write our SQL queries using the features of the language. So like link that we explored a lot on Tuesday of last week. That's how we're going to be writing our SQL statements from here on out. Uh-huh. So because we can do that because in .Net, we use something called Entity Framework. Entity Framework is the ORM that's built by Microsoft to go with C#. There are other ORMs out there with C#, Dapper and Hibernate, that both have their own unique features. But Entity Framework is like the one from Microsoft. Okay. It's great. It does have some downfalls, which we won't get into, but it's not perfect. But there are other solutions that are out there that are better, but they all have the same kind of core principles. And realistically, Entity Framework is one you'll probably be using once you get out into the real world. It's the most popular. Feeling good so far? Okay. So we're going to start doing this inside of a console application. So we're going to .NET new console intro to ORMs. So we have our project here. We're going to open it up. Let me get this live share going.
Did we do link on?
Yes, we did link on Tuesday. Because Monday and Tuesday we did C#. Wednesday and Thursday we did SQL.
Oh. Okay. No. That's bad.
Yeah. What?
That's bad. I don't remember doing link.
I don't remember much of it either. It rings a bell.
So link is like, you actually go head back to the notes real fast to give us a quick refresher.
Awesome.
Yeah, so quick refresher. Can everyone see this all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we were doing link and I didn't realize we were doing link.
Probably.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, these things like order by descending, skip and take, selects, count.
Oh, that's link?
Yes, that is link.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a separate application. Okay.
Nope. So like these sums, min, max, the wheres, the selects,
okay.
this stuff, that's link.
Okay, and that's imported from a C# database, right?
Mm-hmm. So now we're going to take this stuff, these queries, and instead of running them against a list that we made in memory, we're going to be running them against a list called a database.
Okay.
Because really, isn't a database just a giant list?
Yeah.
So we can take all these methods and run them against a database.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I get it. I understand what was link and what wasn't link.
Mm-hmm.
Got it now.
How are you feeling?
I'm recalling Tuesday, going through the notes here,
Mm-hmm.
what we were doing.
Yep.
So these are links here. Where, select, aggregate.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So your list and then link.
Yep.
This to it. So longboards equals circboards, where these are the things that make it a longboard.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an application though, right? That's like strictly link that just like writes SQL queries. That's what I saw.
That's Entity Framework.
That's Entity Framework. Okay.
Entity Framework is what takes your link queries, your link statements, and converts it to SQL.
Got
And then takes the SQL results and converts it back into C#.
Okay, I got you.
So it has
I
that.
understand it now. I thought any framework was like, we didn't really do that.
We use link within a framework a lot, so it's a common misconception, but they're two different things.
Okay.
So, we cool now?
Yeah. I'll go back and watch that video again.
All right. So now we have our project here. We can ignore. So now we need some way to talk to our database, because right now this is just a simple file. We're going to add a couple of packages first. So the first one that we need to add is we need to add the .NET ASP code generator. This will help us generate some files. So this is the first thing that we'll need to run. So just take this, throw it into your terminal. Now this will install a code generators tool for your entire machine. So you only have to install that once, and that's it.
Okay.
Now these next two things, we're going to have to run these per every project.
Okay.
These next two things that we're adding, the first one is Entity Framework. This is kind of the core, like, hey, here's the core libraries.
And we run the top one we run that in our terminal, right?
Yep. Yeah, this is run in any terminal. These are, you have to be inside of the project directory. If you want, I can send these out to you.
Oh, I'm taking notes.
Yeah, so what these two things are, the first one is Entity Framework. And then the second one is which driver that we're going to be using. So it's like, hey, we're using Entity Framework, so include all the Entity Framework stuff. Now we're going to be using the specific Entity Framework driver for Postgres. Now, if we wanted to switch out to like Microsoft SQL, MySQL, or MeSQL, or whatever it's called, we switch out that second driver. But here we're doing Postgres.
Install that every time from within the file.
Yep. So I'm going to go in it now. I'm going to add these. So now that I've added them, just to see like what they've done, we head over to our CS proj here. Remember, our CS proj is kind of like our package.json, describes what dependencies that the project has. You'll notice that the two things that we added are now right here.
Is this a good complete? Sorry. For the global one? Is that good?
Yep.
Is that installed?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Because it says successfully installed.
Yeah, no, I just didn't know. I figured it was something more. I figured it was going to take a while.
Nope. It's really lightweight tool.
Okay.
So now that we have that, now we need to create a database. So on Tuesday, we created a thing of surfboards. What's something else that we like? John,
Your turn.
what's your favorite hobby?
Favorite hobby? Photography. So I could do cameras.
Cameras. Let's do cameras. So I want to create a database for cameras. So the first thing I have to do, create DB, my cameras. My cameras. So now, after I create the database, the next thing I have to do is that I need to create some sort of link from C# to my database. So I need to tell my C# program, hey, I'm using this database and I'm using this specific database. So I'm going to use the database my cameras. So that thing, that link that goes from the console up down to the database, that's called our DB context. Okay. Yep. So we are going to use this big old long command to scaffold our DB context. So let's break this down real fast before we actually run it. We're saying, hey, .NET EF stands for Entity Framework. I want to create a new database context. I want to scaffold it with this connection string. So the connection string is kind of like the address of the database. It says, where am I going? And what server am I going to? And what database am I using? So I'm going to localhost my machine. I'm looking for the database, my cameras that we just created. We're saying, hey, we're going to use Postgres as our driver. And then we're going to call this my cameras context. So it's going to create for me a new DB context called my cameras context that points to this database on my machine. So let's run this command.
Yeah, you created the database already.
Yep.
Then you run the command.
There we go. And these instruction commands will be in the homework. So.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to get it in my notes too, if I can.
Yeah, that's fine. So as we see, it has created for us a my cameras context. So let's check out what's in there. Let me know when.
I'm good. I'm not good.
Okay. So yeah, so it has created for us a new class called my cameras context that inherits from DB context. Have we talked about inheritance yet?
Yeah.
Sort of. I mean,
Ish.
Yeah, we've talked about like inheriting properties from whatever's up the tree.
Okay. Yeah. So this is saying that, hey, my cameras context inherits a whole bunch of properties from a DB context. And we'll see what those are later. We get two constructors that we really don't care about. And then this on creating, this is where we're setting the actual address, the actual connection string. So we're saying, hey, whenever we're configuring this, do this. You're going to see this warning here. For now, you can just ignore it. It's saying you shouldn't store your connection string inside of your source code. We're going to explore other ways to store connection strings later, but for today, we're just going to put it right there. And then that's pretty much it for your data context. For now, at least. So now we are added DB context. So now what we want to do, we actually want to start sculpting our database tables. Because all we've done now is just saying, hey, my application is talking to this database. That's it. Yeah. So we're going to create for us, we want to create a cameras table. So what goes into this cameras table? Before we do any code, what properties do we have?
Can you do brand?
Yep. We'll give it a brand.
Max ISO.
A what? Mac.
What? Yeah, I agree. Let's do something more general. Full frame or crop?
Okay, full frame. Is that like a one of the two? So is full frame?
What's so brand?
Yeah, brand ID is full frame. What else?
Max ISO would work.
Okay.
We could do frames per second.
Frames per second. Okay.
Could do.
You know, that's a really good starting point.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot.
Yeah. So I want to make this table, and I want to map this out inside of my database somehow, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to use something called models to map out the structure of my database. Now these models are only POCOs.
Mhm.
We went over what POCOs were last week, just plain old C# objects. So we're going to be mapping each database table with its own class. So we're going to come in here, we're going to create a cameras class, throw it into a namespace, intro to ORMs, class cameras. And now here, every single one, we'll make this a public class. So every single one of these columns is going to be a property over here. So we have prop int ID, prop string brand, prop bool is full frame. Prop, what is that one? Max.
ISO.
What max ISO?
Not remember.
Okay, that'll be number. What kind of number? An int?
Yep.
Okay. And then the last one is frames per second.
Should also be integer.
Okay. So that works. So now I've mapped out what columns I have as well as the types of what I have. Does that sound good so far?
Mm-hmm.
So now I want to add this to my database. Over here in my context, I'm going to add a property to this context. But it's going to be of type dbSet. This says, hey, inside of my context, inside of my database, I'm going to have a table called cameras that is of type cameras. So I'm saying inside of my database, we now have a table, and its schema, its columns, are the same properties that we have over in cameras.
Okay.
So you created a cameras table.
Mm-hmm. Based off of our cameras class.
So it's just drawing information from the camera CS.
Mm-hmm.
You use public dbSet.
Yep.
Naming cameras to manage.
Yep.
And then this is calling, that's where it's calling like get and put from cameras, right?
Yep. So now this dbSet, this is a fancy type of IEnumerable. It's a fancy type of list.
Mm-hmm.
So with that knowledge, we can now use everything we talked about last week on that list.
Mm-hmm.
But first, we actually have to make this inside of our database now. Because this does not exist inside of our database. This just exists in C#.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to run two commands, .NET EF migrations added cameras. So this is adding what's called a migration. Anytime our schema changes or our models change inside of C#, we need to update our database to reflect that. Because now our database queries, our database structures, its book of truth is now over here inside of C#. Mm-hmm. And every time Entity Framework goes to query the database, it's going to go, hey, are you up to date with the latest version? Yes or no. So we need to always make sure that that our database is the latest version. So we need to add migrations, and then we need to run those migrations. So you can kind of think of these as kind of like a commit. Like, oh, I'm committing changes. I'm committing changes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to create a new migration, .NET EF migrations add, and then this should be some sort of descriptive name. So here we added the cameras table.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to run that.
Is there any functionality that we lose with that terminal? I mean,
Not really. No,
okay.
none that I've encountered yet.
Okay.
I think that's the best way to put it.
So
So
do whatever we want.
Yep. I prefer this because it's kind of like right there. But that's up to you. So we ran this. You notice we got our migrations folder. It created a brand new folder for us. If we open this up, we see a couple of files here. We see we have a snapshot, a designer.cs, and a CS. You can usually ignore these two. But I always like to crack open this CS file. You see that this time, this whole thing, it's the time that it was created, as well as that unique name that we gave it. So it was created 2018, December 17th at 15, that timestamp. Ta-da.
Is that UTC, I guess?
Yes,
Okay.
that is,
3 o'clock universal time?
I'm guessing, nope, that doesn't make sense, but it is
3:36 p.m. universal time.
I guess that would make sense. But yeah, because we're 5 hours ahead. But yeah, it's a timestamp. Now, if I crack open this CS file, we have two things. We have an up. We have an up and we have a down. So whenever we apply this migration, it's going to run this up. And without knowing what syntax is here, we can kind of look at it and kind of infer what it's going to do. It's going to create a table called cameras. It's going to have these columns: ID, brand, is full frame, max ISO, and frames per second. And here are all the types: int, string, boolean, int, and their nullability: false, 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 true, and false. So we kind of see what table that we're going to be getting.
Yeah. The string is the only one that's true.
Yep.
What does that mean, nullable, true, compared to the numbers that are nullable, false?
So that means that we can store null there.
You can store
Yeah.
null there. Okay.
Yes. So can we store null? Yes, for a string, but we cannot store null for the boolean or the integers.
Okay.
So we also notice that the ID, it's picked up that the ID is its primary key. I didn't have to do any other specification. It's looking for legit just a column called ID. It's going to make that its primary key. Entity Framework likes to try to infer things for you a lot, which is great most of the time. So now that we have this, I actually want to run this migration. So .NET database update. .NET EF database update.
So all of this is going to be listed out, like all of these commands?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So it says, hey, applying migration, blah, and done. So now what I can do, I can actually connect to my database. And I can see, here's my cameras table. And then it is /d to see the actual schema. Yep. So over here in PGCLI, we can see now, hey, we have an ID, we have a brand, is full frame, and all the other stuff right there. Feeling good?
Yeah, I mean, I can see how you created it.
Mm-hmm.
I can see what you created. How you created it is what I'm going to learn later.
Yeah, I mean, this is for me. This is an easier way to kind of create a database because like we're not worrying about weird commands. It's just okay. It's just like, hey, here's my blueprint for a table. Give me this table to store this information. So that's all fine and dandy. But now how do we actually use this inside of our code? Let's take a quick 10-minute break. Let's take our morning break and come back in at 10 till, and we'll actually start using this inside of our code. This is a really good kind of break.
Okay. Let's grab some coffee.
Yeah.